Welcome to another episode of the Paradigm 132 podcast. And I am your humble and gracious host, Rashad Horn. And on today's episode, we're going to talk about the Moynihan Report, the Negro Family, the Case for National Action. That is the title in its entirety, and that's the name of the report, right? The report is not talking about the Margaret Sanger eugenics movement in terms of the black family. It is speaking about seemingly the fatherless issue that was occurring in America in 1965 when this particular report was written. At the time that this particular report was written, it was met with some adversity. I would say people labeled Moynihan a racist, amongst other things, when this particular report was written. As you probably could envision, we have a report like this being written in 1965, and the 60s, from a black perspective, is a decade in which the fight seemingly was a victory occurred. A major victory occurred, right, with the passing of the civil rights laws that came about. So we get a huge victory like this, and you have an individual that is bringing up a report about black fathers not being in the home and the irreversible effects that is already having and what it's going to have moving forward. Now, what made me read this particular report? Well, what made me read this report was I read Dr. Thomas Sowell's book, Discrimination and Disparities. And that book was very eye opening in a multitude of different ways. I've done previous podcasts about that particular book, taking out certain things that I felt were vital to the message that I want to convey. And one of the first things that I saw within that particular text was reference to the Moynihan Report, right? Um, I was a part of a project with a good brother of mine named Daryl Wayne Thomas, who has a nonprofit organization, and that is his main focus is trying to eliminate fatherlessness. I have to slow down because I talk too fast sometimes, and I don't want to mince the words, right? And so the name of the project I was a part of was called When the Walls Speak, Fathers Restoring Generational Confidence. And I was amongst 12 other authors, including um, Mr. Thomas, and me not being a father, because the purpose of the book was to talk about fatherhood and how individuals are raising children. I didn't have, I don't have children, but I took it from a perspective um, that things that I learned from my father that my father taught me, right? And so when you read this particular report in 1965, and I made reference to this in last week's podcast when I talked about my slight review of Candace Owens' books Blackout, in which the forward Larry Elder spoke about the biggest thing that's hindering black Americans in this particular country is the lack of fathers in the home. Now, one of the things that I've noticed here recently, right, the more I've gotten more and more engaged into different things, people will pick a particular topic, right? And what end up happening, and to just kind of paint a picture, you have a tree, right? So instead of going to the root, you just pick a branch. You can pick a branch at the top of the tree, you can pick a branch at the bottom of the tree, in the middle, the longest, the shortest, but you can pick a branch, right? But very few people go to the root of the problem. They go to the branch, right? as some people say about medicines. Medicines aren't curing you, they are just prolonging you, seemingly. They're not eradicating the issue in that of itself, because obviously if you eradicate the issue, then we can no longer make any money off of you, right? So the money is in the treatment, not the cure. So you can peddle that around to other topics. People will pick a branch, which are treatments, and they will build an entire infrastructure around that particular branch or that particular topic, and that is their thing. They won't go to the root of the problem. Um, my brother Daryl Wayne Thomas, he's going to the root of the problem, right? Others choose not to. And one of the things that I also notice is that, again, when we go back to the medicine reference, this is the cure. Restoring the black family is the cure to a lot of these particular, to all of the ailments. Let's not just say some, to all of the ailments. But again, the money is not in the cure. The money is in the treatment. So a person that is looking to capitalize or to be advantageous or even to exploit, if you want to use that particular word, and make a living, you're not going to make it speaking about this particular issue, because this particular issue has, even as the report suggested in the 60s, the issue has started to feed on itself. And I'm gonna discuss that as we get into a little bit more of this particular podcast, right? I got the Moynihan report off the blackpost.org. I don't like reading things off of my phone. You know, I like to actually read in the manuscript form. But in this particular situation, I didn't get the manuscript. I probably could have. It was probably a couple things that I could have done, but I just said, hey, you know what? It's not that long. I'll suck it up. I'll read it off my phone. I don't want to listen to it because I don't really feel like I'll be able to digest it the way that I needed to digest it. So I read this report in its entirety last week, and since then I have just been going back in and picking out different things within it and just inputting it, and then I'm visualizing how I feel like something like this has been affecting me in terms of my personal life, but not affecting me personally, but just seeing things that have transpired around me and how these particular things are still relevant to this day. Now, again, referring back to my previous podcast, in the foreword of the Blackout book, Larry Elder pulled two statistics. One was by Dr. Walter Williams, and another was by Mr. Moynihan himself. And Walter Williams stated in the 1940s the amount of black children born out of wedlock was around 12%. Fast forward to the 1960s, when this particular report was published, it was up to 20. Fast forward to today, depending on the place that you go get your statistics, it's anywhere between 70 and 80%, right, out of wedlock. And to go back to another podcast that I titled Missing Pieces, this is where I'm talking about people will capitalize off of this. They will pull statistics but don't put context behind said statistics, right? So again, for those who haven't listened to that podcast and for those who have listened, I'm going to seemingly regurgitate things that I said on that one, just in this particular stanza or this particular space right here. We hear that the black family wealth is X and white family wealth is X, or is Y, right? It's X and then it's Y. However, This is the issue with this particular thing. And we'll just pick a number. We'll say 73% because that's the last number I saw. If 73% of black families are headed by single black females, right? And let's just say, and they always love using a family of four. Let's use a family of four. Let's say that particular family, black family of four, is not being compared to a white family in which there's a single white mother with three children. That particular family is being compared to two white people, which you have two eligible workers. Whereas in a situation with a black female single mother, you don't have, more than likely, with three children, she's not going to be the most educated. And this is no knock on ones who get it in. But again, y'all are the minority. Y'all know that y'all are the minority. Don't argue as if y'all are the majority. Y'all are not. So, you have one eligible worker more times than not. She's the only eligible worker. She's probably working minimum wage, right? And since you're the only particular parent, you also have to take into account that, hey, if something happens with your child and you have to leave work, they're going to dock your pay, right? Whereas over here, with the two parent setup, one particular parent could leave work, get pay docked, but the other parent is still working. So this is how this particular thing is an issue, because you're comparing things that are not the same. They're different, right? And I say that to say this. The statistics are there. The numbers are there. The things are there that suggest that crime, poverty, low education, low self-esteem, all these particular things are evident in single parent households. Again, I follow people on social media. I've read books from individuals. Now, obviously, more times than not, if I'm reading a book about you, obviously you defy the odds. Where you have individuals that made it out of these said conditions. I've heard stories of individuals saying, hey, I was the oldest of 8, or I was the youngest of 6. Father walked out. I made it. Congratulations. You're the minority. You come back, and what do, right? You don't put your children in the same situation that your father put you in. You're in your children's life, right? So the issue becomes when you come back and you say, well, hey, you can make it. Well, yeah, you can, right? You can. It's not impossible that a person can't make it. But by and large, most people aren't, right? Perfect example, right? So I'm not gonna call any names. This is not to be disparaging to anyone or about anything, but within our particular culture, if that's what you want to label it as, we have the "I got it out the mud, I did it myself" mentality in a lot of things, and this is still tying into this particular report. So I'm not going off on one of my usual tangents. All of this means something, right? So when you have individuals that speak that particular way, and they go back and they impute that into the youth, you would think that the numbers would be better than what the numbers are. You would think that the numbers would not be what they are, but they are, right? So it's 73% in climbing, right? 73% in climbing. And the issue is, again, is the fact that the black family has been deteriorated. It has been demolished. It has been all these particular different things. And so one of the things that I hear people say Well, it dates back to slavery. It dates back to slavery. Well, if it dates back to slavery, then why in the world was in 1940 children born out of wedlock in 12%, and they were closer to slavery in 1940 than we are in 2021 when it's 73%. Now, again, I preface this by saying we know about the drug epidemic, right? We understand about during the 80s, at the height of the crack era, which after the thorough destruction of the Panthers within the late 70s, things began to change. What else happened within the 70s, right? The Honorable Elijah Muhammad transitioned. The nation was seemingly broken up. It wasn't as strong as it was in the 50s, the 60s. It wasn't as strong as it was during that particular time, where the aspect was to build a person up, right? So you had all these particular things falling, but you still have the NAACP, you still got the Urban League, you still got all these other particular different things. But the aspect of it is that it has gotten to a point today where the aspect of being someone's baby mother or being someone's baby father is looked at as an accomplishment. It's looked at as being an accomplishment. And we also have, I don't want to call it a war. I call it a battle, right? I don't I don't seek this out, right? Sometimes I'm scrolling through someone that I follow's page. I look at something they post. I may go through the comments, and then boom, there it is, right? I remember a couple months ago, I was on Twitter, and I saw a black woman basically say, "What do we need a black man for? What do we need a man for? Right? What do we need that for?" And again, going back to this, it was a case for national action in 1965. So what do you think it is in 2021 when we have these particular different type of statements made, right? And so you have individuals that feed into this without, again, putting all the pieces of the puzzle together. When you're missing pieces on the puzzle, it's not complete. But again, going back to my tree analogy, where no one goes to the root, people just get a branch. They build a moat around that particular branch, and that is their talking point. So if a person is attracted to a person, when I say attracted, I'm speaking about the way that a person presents something, the way a person says something, all of these particular things. If you are attracted to that person, you're more than likely going to be attracted to that branch. You're not going to go over there and look at the other branch. You're doggone sure ain't going to the root, right? And so, as I look back at that particular tweet and think back to that particular tweet after I read this particular report, it's in here. 1965, it was in this particular report. And the report shows, right? It says in this particular report, in a single woman-headed household, if the woman has a daughter and a woman has a son, the woman more than likely is going to push the daughter for academic excellence and not the son. 1965, it was stated that women were more likely to go to college, black women, than black men. All right. So what is this? So where do we get to with this, right? So if we have more black women going to college, getting more educated, and we have more black men not going to college, not getting educated, and not being able to work jobs, right, that require for you to have some type of advanced skill set or some type of advanced degree, what's going to happen? You're not going to have the opportunity to work, right? I tell my wife this all the time, and I don't know. I don't. Well, I feel like that this is not going to be the case in the next couple of years with the way things are going. But even as I don't even want to say as late. Well, yeah, yeah, as late as when I was in high school, right? The thing was is that hey, you can still go get a job. You can still go get a job, make a good living without going to college, right? I told my wife, I said, men and women don't have that particular aspect, right? In this particular area where I'm at, the working in the oil field is a big thing. What I do is a big thing. Driving trucks, that's a big thing. You don't need education, so to speak, to work. You need to have some common sense. You need to have the ability to perform your job, of course, but you don't need a bachelor's or a master's or a doctoral degree as a prerequisite to get one of these particular positions, right? Now, obviously, if you're trying to come in from a management standpoint, maybe work in the office and stuff like that, you're going to need that. You're going to need to be somewhat proficient in Microsoft Office and all this particular stuff like this. So, we're at a dilemma now, right? Where, again, we have the single mothers that are going to promote their daughter to get the education because she knows that, hey, a woman more than likely cannot get a job or make she can't do what a man can do even in the 70s, right? Even when it was time when people defined manhood, they always say the man goes out to work, right? We've all heard that particular story. Oh, my grandfather or my great uncle or something like that, he had a third grade education and he did all this particular stuff like this, right? Those days are over. Those days are over. Now, the thing about it is with that third grade particular education, if he was able to make a living and be successful, he had a lot of on the job training. He's gone through a lot of trial and error, so he understands how to do things, right? He does. But you don't have that opportunity today. And why don't you have that opportunity today? Well, to reference back to discrimination and disparities, Dr. Thomas Sowell talked about how the minimum wage law coming into effect affected that as well. And, and I'm gonna touch on that in another podcast. But let's stay right here where we're at. So in the '60s, it was stated that a black male was between 1.2 and right around 1.5 grade levels behind a black woman, right? And we see this played out you know to this day, right? My wife, I have a associate's degree, as I've said before. My wife is working on a master's. So by and large, my wife is 2 grade levels. As far as a degree, she's 2 steps ahead of me, right? And in the field of study that she's in, even though the workload that is being performed, I don't feel that you need all of that, but you understand that these are prerequisites for these particular positions, right? So, so we have a scenario where the boy has to be the man of the house. I was listening to something where a guy was talking about when we talk about professional athletes and stuff like that, which black people we make up in excess of 85%, of the major ones, the football and the basketball. And one of the things that people ask, well, hey, what are you gonna buy with your first chick? What you gonna do with your money when you first get it? And the first thing they say is, I'm gonna go buy mom a house. And so the guy said, or they asked a white player, well, what was he gonna do? And his first thing was, well, um, my dad always told me to invest my money, so that's what I'm gonna do. He taught me about investing, so that's what I'm gonna do. And so, reading this particular report, one of the things that it highlighted, well, two of the things that it highlighted, was that children who don't have fathers in the home seek immediate gratification quicker or instant gratification quicker than those who have two parents in the household. And also, Without a family structure, a father and a mother in the home, children miss out on socialization and things that they need to learn in a family setting. They miss out on those particular things without it there. And one of the things that I've always heard, because I played sports, is they say that, well, sports can teach you a lot about life. Right? Sports can teach you about a lot of life lessons. And when I hear that statement now, I go back to this particular report and I say, well, in reference to black athletes, which by and large most of them do not have a father, this is going to teach them the structure and the things that they need, right? But there's only a small percentage of black kids that are going to participate in athletics, whether it's basketball, football, track, baseball, whatever. What about the others? They're not getting those particular life lessons because they're in the same situation as the athlete from a home standpoint, but at least they are getting somewhat of it. However, a larger majority are not getting it, right? Which leads to the aspects of the things that we talked about. So, again, in the 60s, we have the war on poverty, right? And I've been hearing this particular thing again saying, hey, we have to end childhood poverty. And I'm thinking to myself, I'm like, wait a minute, how can you end childhood poverty? Right? How? And Dr. Soul talked about it, and even it's in this particular report as well, how certain federal programs are set up to combat these particular issues. And again, these particular federal programs were set up in the 60s, and the issue is still here. They talk about the Afghan war being the longest war of all time. No, the war on poverty and the war on drugs are still raging on today with no end in sight because for whatever reason they continue to get new things that call for more action to combat this. And the easiest way to stop childhood poverty is to promote families staying together, right? So, my wife told me about a situation with a particular person, and unfortunately, the person was had a child or was having a child, and unfortunately, had a miscarriage. And I told my wife, I said, you know, I've seen this movie multiple times. You have the situation where the father is there for the birth of the child. They get the picture, blase blah. The child may be 7 or 8 months old, and next thing you know, you see the caption: "Me and mine gonna be all right," or "I'm living for you," or "We gonna make it." Blase blah. We get all these particular different things, and again, this is worn as a badge of honor in this community. And I'm trying to figure out why has there not been things that have been done to try to combat this particular issue, right? Because again, it seems that individualism has overshadowed the aspect of common sense, the common logic. When you really sit down and think about it, because one of the things that we're doing, and I have to incorporate myself into this because I'm not above the culture, I'm not beneath the culture, I'm within the culture. So I'm not gonna speak from an aspect like I'm not within the culture. I don't adhere to all of the things that transpire in this culture, but I'm of the culture. But there's nothing that's being put out there that is saying, hey, you know what we need to do? You have Planned Parenthood, right? And they go and talk and give you counseling. Hey, do you want to get an abortion? No, I'm not. Of course, I'm not getting into that talk, right? But it's there, right? You have counseling. You have counseling for this. You have marriage counseling. You have counseling before you get married, right? But one of the issues and one of the problems is that if you're in a situation, and the studies again are there, that if a child's born out of wedlock, there's a high percentage that they're going to have children that are out of wedlock as well. So what you have is right there, you have two generations of individuals that do not know what it's like to have a family structure. And again, because you attach yourself to one of these limbs, you attach yourself to the limb of black girl magic and feminism or whatever it is that you want to attach yourself to, the aspect that say, I don't need him, he's trifling, he's this, he's not educated, he won't work, he's lazy, he's all these particular different things. Without stopping and thoroughly analyzing and saying, wait a minute, and stop and pretending that these particular issues are only relevant or only have taken place in your lifetime, right? 1965. And in 1965, out of wedlock birth for black children was at 25%. And Moynihan said, this is a case for national action. At 25%, it was national action. But we're in an era, we're in a generation where you have smartphones, but you don't know how to use them to research and to try to solve problems, right? Even within this particular report itself, he noted that, hey, look, we're not here to pose a solution to the issues. We're just here posing the problems, and we're just all of the research that we're doing is all leading back to this one particular thing. Out of wedlock births lead to poverty, leads to crime, leads to violence, leads to all these particular different things like this, and draws me to another point. Recently, there was a artist. I don't want to just label him as a rapper. I want to say it for what it is because the reason I want to say it's an artist simply because when you make music videos, when you are fashionable and all these particular different things like this, you become an artist, right? You're art. By the name of Young Dolph. And I was a fan of his music. I was a fan of his music. I listened to him when he first came out. He was tragically shot down in his hometown. And the media circus, the thing got to going, and the first thing they say, that's why you don't need to go back. So you need to go back to the hood because people don't like you. Crabs in a barrel. All this stuff, blase, blah, blase, blah. And I stopped and I told my wife, I said, you know what? I'm tired of hearing about crabs in a barrel. I'm tired of hearing it. And my reason for being tired of hearing it is because of this report right here. Because if you want to really talk about crabs in a barrel, the crabs in the barrel, truly and honestly, is the aspect that black men and black women can lay down, have a child, and then not want to have anything to do with each other anymore. And men do not want to take care of their responsibilities when they have a child. That's the real crabs in the barrel. That's the real crabs in the barrel. Because you don't want to give your child a better chance. I told my wife one time, I feel like there are people that are jealous of their children because their children can come home. You can crush a child's spirit. A child can come home from school and is excited about something that they learned. And, dang, my teacher said I can do this and I can do that. And the parent can come in and say, no, you can't. You ain't going to do nothing. You're going to be just like me. And it crushes the spirit. That's the real crabs in the bucket. A barrel. That's the real crabs in the barrel. Because the shooting, the black on black crime that the media loves to propagate anytime someone wants to talk about the senseless murder of unarmed black men, they want to go to black on black crime. Because that's their out. That's their ultimate rebuttal. And we, again, within this particular culture, want to only attribute crabs in a barrel to when a brother is jealous of someone for having something, right? A brother is jealous of somebody for having something. When in reality, that young man or that young woman had a full family together, they wouldn't even think like that. They will understand that somebody they worked for that, right? It didn't come by luck. They actually they have a skill. They have a particular talent. Um, this report again talks about another thing, right? Going back to um, pre 60s, the aspect was the black man, he went out to work, the woman was at home with the children, rearing the children, making sure the children did the work and all this particular stuff. However, we have a situation where black men are unemployed now, or the work that they do have is not enough, right? We watched, well, I say we, but I don't know if any of y'all watched the BMF series with Big Meech and how his father was working at GM and he wasn't making enough for ends to meet, and his mother had to come out and she had to go to work. Now I'm not gonna sit up here and say that if it was a situation where their father was making enough to provide for the household that the BML story would have never commenced. I can't say that, right? But I probably would go out and say that there was a higher percentage that it probably wouldn't have occurred if those particular things weren't at play, right? And so that's what this particular paper talks about. Is now you not only is the father removed from the house from a working aspect, which has always been the case, but now the mother has been removed from the house and now she's working. And so then you get to the point where the male is underemployed, unemployed because of minimum wage laws, because of racist unions, and all these particular different things that put a ceiling on a black man's earning potential, and also the entrepreneurship aspirations of black people at the turn of the century, where it wasn't about, as what Elijah Muhammad and Marcus Garvey and others preached about doing for self, creating businesses and trying to employ your own people. Once all that particular stuff is out the window and you become dependent upon someone to make sure that you're putting food on your table, then they have the wherewithal to say whether or not you meet said requirements. Um, this report also talked about the military entrance mental exam and how black men weren't able to pass the exam. And one of the things that they talked about in the military, and I'm sure a lot of people who are in the military that are active duty, they can attest to this, that the military has good benefits, right? Whether it's for homes, whether it's for education, teach you a skill set, all these particular different things like this, that's a good way for someone to make a living for themselves. But everybody can't go to the military because everybody can't pass the entrance exam. And one of the reports stated in this particular Moynihan report, and this was in the 60s now, was that 45% of the individuals that failed the test came from broken homes, right? So if we fast forward that to today, right, 73% of black households are headed by black females. We're talking about, and if we just put it in that particular standpoint, we're talking about 45% of black kids that take the entrance exam for the military are not going to make it into the military. So that's another career opportunity that's not there for you, because you can rank up in the military. You can become a engineer and all of this particular stuff like this. You can do all these particular different things within this particular structure. But if you can't pass the entrance exam to get in, you're not going to make it. You're only going to go so far from an athletic standpoint if you're only going to go so far athletically in terms of your outlook based on how well you can understand the material that's given to you in a classroom setting, right? So all of these particular things are at play, right? All these particular things are at play. And again, when we going back to this particular thing, as I said, when the father was out working and the mother was at home, this role in today's terminology that could never happen because you have women that are highly educated. They are single. Some have opted to say, "Hey, I don't want to have children. I'm going to put my career first," and that's fine, right? That's fine, right? But you also have the situations where you have the one that has three children, may have four children by different individuals, and we can trace it back and say, okay, well, you are the product of something that transpired, and you probably have to go back 2 to 3 generations before you could actually see anything that resembled a strong black family. And we're so far removed from that the things that are transpiring today are side effects of things that were detected and studied in 1965. Now, again, like I said in the beginning of this particular podcast, ain't no money in talking about that. If that's your sole objective, there's no money in trying to talk about, hey, we need to figure out ways that if black women are having children, we need to figure out ways that the black man is in their life. That he understands that, listen, if you walk out of this child's life, the chance for success is not in their favor. If you walk out, you may feel like that you're nothing today. You may feel like that, hey, I'm not where I want to be in life. I can't do this. It needs to be hammered home. If you walk out of this child's life, this child is not going to make it. This child is going to be subjected to discrimination, to racial stereotyping, be attracted to a family that may not have the best principles in place. I listen to a multitude of stuff, man, um, because I try to get an understanding of the origins of a lot of things. And my wife is always picking me like, why you watch the gangster shows and why do you watch this? Who cares about that? I'm like, it's some information in here. And one of the biggest things that we always hear when a person joins a gang or organization is they say it feels like family. Because majority of these gangs are majority men, mostly men. You may have a few females in there, but because the man is not at home, the father is not at home. And so a person say, oh, we need to dismember the gang. We need to set up laws. We need to take um, Larry Hoover off the streets. We need to take Tukey Williams off the street. We need to take Jeff Fort off the streets. We need to take all these individuals off the streets because they're being harmful, right? They're doing terrible things to the community. They're polluting the youth, right? And maybe they were, right? Maybe they were. I mean, obviously, of course, the things that they charged Jeff Fort with, I mean, that's a little overboard. But at the same time, that particular person was tasked with something that even he probably didn't know he was going to be tasked with. You are tasked with being a father figure, a leader to people who don't have a father at home. And even to some that do have a father at home. Because what is the hardest thing to do? The hardest thing to do is to be different. The hardest thing to do is be different. If you're in a situation where the majority of people around you are not in secure situations, but you're around them every day, you probably end up picking up those particular habits because you're around them a lot more. Those people become your friends. And the influence that you have at home, it takes a very, very strong man in many regards. It takes a very strong family in many regards to the point that they can elevate their child out of it. But more than likely, they are going to, by and large, put themselves in a situation where they don't have to have their children subjected to that. They're going to have their children around other children who are within similar situations. So the reverse happens. And the reverse is children that may come from a single family household. You understand certain structures that come from people that have two parents at home. Those people become your friends. Y'all come and hang out. You may pick up habits and things from them and say, dang, they have a father at home. Like, oh, you make them, clean up the bed and, take out the trash. And maybe some of those things may rub off on you. And maybe you may go home and you may do those things yourself. But a lot of times in the inner cities, by way of the way that they set up public housing, and this report discusses this. Again, this is the 60s, man. Talked about how basically public housing segregated um, African Americans away from white people. And obviously, when we read the color of law, we understand the reasoning for that, right? Certain laws were put into place where these particular things are now. And I'm going to get out of here. And so I said in the beginning, I said, I'm going to touch on how this particular thing is feeding on itself at this particular point. You can't blame white racism on the destruction of the black family because you can go back to the 40s where the amount of born out of wedlock was 12%. It's 73% now. Now, again, like I said, we can go to the 70s and the 80s and we'll talk about the crack epidemic. We can talk about the crime bill and all these particular different things that took black men off the streets. But all of those particular things, we can look at them and say that they're terrible, but it goes back to, as Dr. Thomas Sowell talked about, that the welfare state is more to blame. It's more to blame. Simply because from a minimum wage standpoint, an employer has to decide whether or not you're worth hiring. And if they don't have the funds to go through a application, I know how some people make the joke about, oh man, as soon as they see your ethnicity or they see your particular name, they push your application to the side. There's some validity to that. If an employer is not doing the due diligence of adding extra money, and more than likely a fast food or a low income place, they're not doing that. They're gonna sit up here and look, oh, he's black or he has a black name. I don't want the risk, right? I don't want the risk. You may not be a good worker. All this particular stuff. They feed into those particular stereotypes, and those stereotypes are there because of the welfare state, right? So those are things that we have to talk about because again, all these particular missing pieces, and people are going to make money off of talking about the pieces that are there instead of talking about the missing pieces, right? But this is a good report, man. If like I said, I got it from blackpast.org. That's where I read it from, but I would like each and every one of y'all to go and read this, right? And we can get an understanding of some of the issues because again, it is at a it's worse now than it was in 2021. Right? It's worse now. Then you got the system in it where now you child support. I mean, it's all kind of stuff, right? That promotes the destruction of the family, right? And I'm gonna say this one thing. I'm gonna get out of here. Well, I'm gonna say these two things, right? I'm gonna say these two things. I'm gonna get out of here. I was reading a report. This was it's right during COVID, right? And a lot of the employers were upping employees' pay in order to entice them to continue to work. So I read one particular story where a woman was on government assistance. And so she talked about how she got a raise at her job and realized that it put her over the limit for government assistance. And so she was making, she wasn't making it, prior to getting the raise. But as soon as she got the raise, the government assistance went away. She was getting um, assistance with daycare and all those particular different things like that. But when she got that raise, all those things went away. And so she had to get another job, take a drop in pay to make sure she didn't lose that. And that's awful, when people have to choose to make less money on their job so that the government won't take things away from them, right? And another story, where I know a lady, and she had a husband. He went to jail for a domestic dispute, not not between her and him, but between her and someone else that she knew. And so when you get one of those Section 8 houses and stuff like that, there's not supposed to be a male there. So anyway, I guess they were coming by doing a check and they saw that he was there. And so they gave him an ultimatum. They said, look, either he leaves or he stays, and instead of this being Section 8, instead of you paying this reduced rent, y'all got to pay us a mortgage and y'all got to pay this house off. And the man, well, he was like, I'm not gonna leave my family, man. I'm gonna be here for my kids. So I'm just gonna go out and do what I gotta do to make sure this mortgage get paid. And so that's what happens. But anyway, that's another episode of Paradigm 132 Podcast. Be back to you again next week. Peace.